And what about the future president? Well, you can have any attitude toward him, because during his first iteration as president, he was dubbed as mostly a businessman, that he is not very well versed in politics. He can make a lot of mistakes. But from the outset, I can tell you that his behavior when there was an attempt on his life, I was impressed. He's a courageous person. And it's not just about the hand he raised and his call to fight for their common values and ideals. Of course, there was a rush of adrenaline, but a person shows their true color in these emergencies. And this is precisely one of those cases, and I think he acquitted himself admirably in a valiant fashion as a man. As far as politics is concerned, I don't know, during his first presidency, I don't know whether he's going to hear that, but I think I'm going to say that regardless. I think he was harassed by everyone on all sides, bullied. He was afraid of making a step to the left or to the right, saying the wrong thing. I don't know what's going to happen right now during his new presidency, because this is going to be his last presidency. Whatever he does, it's up to him to decide. But what he's been saying publicly up until now, I would be loath to comment on what was said during the electoral campaign, because, that was a deliberate thing to fight for votes. But regardless, what he said about his desire to rebuild relations with Russia, to facilitate an end to the Ukrainian crisis, I think this deserves attention, at the very least, and I would like to take this opportunity to offer my congratulations on his election as President of the United States. As I said before, we are going to work with any head of state that is going to garner the trust of the American people.
But we need to go back to that system of mutual trust with time. I don't know, we can discuss it till early hours of the morning, but it's the first step to create a single Eurasian security system. Is it possible to know? Chancellor Kohl, whom I spoke about at the beginning, said that it's not just necessary, but it's an imperative, and I share his point of view. Mr. President, why do you think that Chancellor Kohl was more genuine than Chancellor Merkel, whom you mentioned later during the Minsk process? Well, there were the three of us sitting down in Bonn. That was back in Bonn. The government of Germany was in Bonn, and we simply talked to each other. Madame Merkel, Chancellor Merkel, she spoke under certain social pressure and during a crisis.
As far as the possibility for establishing our relations with the U.S. is concerned, we're open to these possibilities. To a large extent, the ball is in the U.S.'s court, because we were not the ones to sour relations with them. We did not introduce any restrictions or sanctions against the U.S., nor are we facilitating any armed conflicts in the territories in their proximity. We've never sought anything like that, and I would like to say that we've never done anything like that in practice. We do not quite see why the U.S. seems it has the right to do that, and we are hopeful that at the end they will come to realize that they'd better refrain from doing that, because that's what they should be doing if we do not want any global conflicts. But the president-elect of the U.S., President Trump, spoke along similar lines, so we'll live and see how it plays out in reality. Keeping in mind, of course, that such an institution as the presidency of the U.S. is bound by certain obligations, by certain responsibilities. The president of the U.S. is tied, to a certain extent, to those people who helped him arrive in power. In the past, Jacques Chirac said, what kind of democracy can we talk about in the U.S.? Because without a billion, if you don't have $1 billion in the pocket, you shouldn't even entertain the thought of participating in the elections. let alone participate in practice. And those people who provide those billions, they participate in building the future team. And if they delegate someone, they have a lever for exerting influence upon those people who will be part of that team. So it's important to see whether the president-elect manages to build good relations with this so-called deep state and also build contacts and relations with the voters. If he keeps his promises, his authority is growing, and he can use that authority to become an independent political figure, even in his relations with those influence groups that help him arrive in power. It's a very complex process. What's going to happen in the US is something we cannot tell for sure, but I'm hopeful that our relations with the United States of America will be re-established at a certain point in time, and we are open to that. Do we understand if there is neutrality, then we could talk about borders. If there is no neutrality, then it's difficult to imagine any kind of good neighborly relations between Russia and Ukraine. Why is that? Because that would mean that Ukraine would be constantly used as a tool in someone else's hands, to the detriment of Russia's interests. So basically, the basic conditions for normalizing relations would not be there, and the situation could take an unpredictable turn. We would very much like to avoid that. Quite the contrary. What we want is building an environment for durable settlement. We want Ukraine to be a truly independent sovereign state rather than being a tool in the hands of some third nations, used by them to further our own interests.
Don't miss out. Log on to oneindia.com for more updates.